Hi, I'm Katrina Webb, founder of New Day and your podcast host. In each episode, we'll speak with ambitious leaders from around the world who are creating meaningful change and inspiring leadership for the greater good. Their stories will spark your own leadership journey and offer practical tools to help you lead with purpose and impact. So I'm excited to be joined by someone whose work has profoundly shaped how we understand meaning, purpose, and human connection at work. Dr. Zach Mercurio works with individuals and organizations worldwide to forge purposeful leaders who cultivate more meaning, mattering, well-being, and performance. He is a positive leadership and organizations researcher and an honorary fellow of psychology in the Center for Meaning and Purpose at Colorado State University. Zach is also the author of The Power of Mattering: How Leaders Can Create a Culture of Significance, and the book The Invisible Leader. His research has been recognised by the Association for Talent Development and the Academy of Management, and he contributes regularly to international media outlets. Zach's work beautifully aligns with everything we hold close at New Day: belonging, contribution, and creating environments where people can truly thrive and matter. Zach, welcome to the New Day podcast. I've been so looking forward to having this conversation with you today.
I know. And as I was preparing, I was thinking about speaking at New Day several years ago, I think coming off of the pandemic around purpose and meaning. And so it's really good to be on the podcast.
Oh, yeah, Zach, can you believe that was over 4 years ago and we were coming out of COVID? We had you live virtually. And can I say you're one of our first speakers at our New Day Summit? And we'd purchased your Invisible Leader book, and we had quite a lot of books out in our foyer. And halfway through your presentation, people snuck out, and your book was sold out before you even finished
Oh,
it.
well, that's nice. I get an assist from the topic, right? Purpose.
Yeah. No,
Right.
it was
Everybody's looking
brilliant.
for it.
Yeah, people are still talking about the impact that you had at our New Day Summit, and it was a
No, good.
wonderful presentation. And since then, you've got a wonderful new book called The Power of Mattering, which I can't wait to explore today. But for the people that don't know your background, Zach, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into researching these two really important topics.
Yeah, it was all by happy accident. I think the happy accidents happened when I just met a lot of ordinary people who did ordinary things with an extraordinary perspective. And it started in a job that I hated out of university. I was in advertising. I was making good money. I had all the outward indicators of success, but I felt empty. And the people around me seemed empty. I mean, everybody talked about what they did the last weekend or what they were doing with the weekend coming up. And that's when I started doing an informal experiment around Washington, D.C. I started just talking to people that I thought seemed joyful in their work, bus drivers, people who worked at bookstores, baristas. And I started uncovering something really interesting that the most joyful people I talked to, and I asked them what they loved about what they did, is they talked about their contribution. They did not talk about the actual act of doing the job. They talked about how the job mattered to other people and how they mattered and how they felt part of something by doing that job, no matter what it was. And then after that, I was like, whoa, I got to go study this. So left that job, went and studied really adult education, adult psychology, the experience of meaningfulness in work and life, of which one of the key components is a sense of purpose, knowing that we contribute. But there was still something missing in our work around purpose, which is understanding your contribution. And we found that what was missing in that first book that I wrote, and now I wish I had written that book second, is that someone can not have a purpose, a contribution, if they don't first believe they're worthy of contributing. It's very hard for someone to see their gifts and their strengths and how those gifts and strengths make an impact if they don't first believe that they have them. And so we started seeing this need for relationships in which we feel that we're seen, heard, valued, and needed as almost a prerequisite to being able to see our purpose and reinforcing that purpose. And that brought us to this research on mattering and how it relates to meaningfulness and informs purpose.
Okay, that's really helpful because now I'm going to flip the books around and we can talk about.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah.
I really like that. It's really important, isn't it, to understand that you matter. Zach, when was the first time you felt like you mattered then?
I didn't think about it until someone asked me that question as I was writing the book, which is interesting because these moments we tend not to think about, but they tend to shape our lives. I was a senior in high school, and I was struggling to think of myself as worthy of going to university. I was the youngest of three. And my older brothers were very successful, but I was sort of a mediocre student. I mean, to be honest with you, I liked writing. I liked everything. That's the problem, all subjects. I couldn't specialize in anything. And I took this elective class just to get some credit to graduate high school. And it was a journalism class. And my journalism teacher at the time was relentless. I mean, every week she would bring me a brochure of a university. And I remember one day she brought in this brochure. It was for this university called James Madison University in the state of Virginia. And she said, they have a really good journalism program. And she's like, Zach. And I said, what? I mean, she was like, really, like, she's like, look at me. She's like, I can really see you here. Like, I hope you become a writer. And I ended up going to that university. I ended up majoring in journalism. I found myself deviating out of that path to go into that advertising job. But I came back to writing. I came back to researching, qualitative research, story-based research. And that one moment of having one teacher, I don't remember her name. I've asked my mom, I've asked my parents what her name was. I don't remember her name. That one moment of having someone relentlessly show me the evidence that someone believed in me in about a 3-second interaction completely changed my life course and self-beliefs. And that's what we find, these small moments of mattering where somebody pays attention to us. They show us an action to show us that we have what it takes. They show us that we're significant. They name gifts we didn't even know we had. They show us how we're needed and capable. We found that those moments can really shape people's day, lives, careers, and trajectories.
Yeah, wow, that's really powerful. What did that feel like for you?
I don't really know at the time, but I have to reflect on what I knew at the time, which was it felt like I'm going to do this. It felt like a solidifying feeling of, oh, I can do this. I finally got some signal from the outside world that I was worthy.
Mm.
And I mean, I think this is what is very important that we find is that when people feel seen and heard and valued by other people, there are two self-beliefs that start forming. And those two self-beliefs, we've called them in psychology self-esteem and self-efficacy. The belief that I'm worthy. So the belief that I belong here, but the belief that I'm capable. And upon researching those things, the most significant predictor of those two beliefs are verbal reinforcement from others and being in relationships that show us the evidence that we're worthy and the evidence that we're capable. And that feeling of when you know you're valued, you develop the confidence you need to go out and add value. And I think I felt that confidence, like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I can do this now. And it was just one person, but I never had that self-concept until that one person introduced some new evidence into my life.
That's amazing. I love that story, Zach. So if we take this to the workplace and, with your research that you did, it's always helpful for people to look at a concept and understand what it doesn't look like. I'd love for you to talk about what you might see in organizations from leaders or managers that people experience that isn't mattering.
Yeah. So, I mean, mattering is the belief that we're significant to the people around us. It's feeling important to the people around us. And there's a couple of symptoms or signals that you may see that somebody doesn't feel significant. And it's important to understand mattering as a survival instinct because it helps explain some of these symptoms. So from the moment we're born, we reach out to be important to somebody because if anybody listening here, well, nobody would be here listening if at some point we all hadn't mattered enough to another person to keep us alive. So that visceral survival instinct to be important to somebody turns into this fundamental psychological need to feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. Now, just like if the instinct to sleep or eat wasn't met, our bodies sort of revolt, our minds revolt. And so when we reach out and find no one reaching back, when we feel invisible, when we feel overlooked, two things typically happen. We either withdraw or we act out in desperation. So withdrawal are things like, that trend, quiet quitting. Quiet quitting was born by this TikTok influencer who said, hey, if you don't like your job, just do the bare minimum just to get by. And it went viral. At the same time, the lying flat movement in China went viral. Well, people were taking pictures of themselves lying flat on their bed in the middle of the day. And it wasn't a result of a lazy, entitled generation. When you really look at the reasons why, people were renouncing feeling insignificant. It was the inevitable withdrawal response to having that survival instinct to be important or seen by society or a workplace not met. So, some things you might see if people are not speaking up as much, if people are gossiping amongst each other and not sharing that with you, if people are withholding information, if people are leaving, if people are quote unquote quiet quitting and they're showing up and they're not showing much energy to the work. Usually those are symptoms of insignificance. Or it could be much louder in an organization. Acts of desperation are things like gossiping, complaining, blaming, protesting. Many behaviors that we label as toxic are actually the language of the unheard and the unseen. So if there's a lot of toxic behaviors in your organization and people are acting out, that's usually a sign that people feel insignificant. Some things you might notice is that if you have no time in your organization, if people always say, I don't have time for this, that's a signal because hurry and care can't coexist. You can't care for someone when you're in a hurry. If you are in an organization and all of your interactions are transactional, meaning that you hear people just asking, what's the status on that? When's that project going to get done? A good test is that if you were to call your direct reports out of the blue right now today in the middle of the day and they saw your name on their phone, what would their first reaction be? If you're sitting here right now being like, ooh, it might be anxiety. That doesn't mean you're an uncaring leader. It just means that too many of your interactions are transactional, not transformational. If you're canceling one-on-ones or your one-on-ones start seeming like just automatic, if people stop sharing things about their lives, these are all indicators that people feel unseen and unheard.
Yeah, that's great, Zach. So why is it happening? Is it why are we seeing this happening in organizations? Is it because of our fast pace of how we're working now, workload? What are the patterns that are causing this to not be seen as much as we want to have it?
Well, to see, hear, value somebody takes three things. I mean, it takes time and attention, and it takes skill. And one of the things that we're finding is that there is a decay of social skills over the past 25 years, and that we don't really know what's happening. And, I'm included in that. Like, I teach what I need to hear the most. But about 25 years ago to the month, we sent our first text message as a species. And since we've been communicating with one another in these short bursts of impersonal, where we don't have to actually see a face or experience a person, transactions. So if you, Katrina, give me some bad news, I have the ability now to send you a sad faced emoji and just say, hey, I'm sorry to hear that. And I think I've done my moral duty to you as a human being. But what I haven't done is I haven't had to seek understanding. I haven't had to show empathy. I haven't had to show compassion. Anytime we don't use a skill, it decays over time. Research on skill decay finds that a skill can decay within 4 days of not using it. There are 38 million people. Right now, it's a work day in the US. There are 38 million people on Slack right now, sending messages back and forth. The average adult sends 30 to 40 text-based messages to peers a day. So we're more connected than ever, but we're lonelier than ever. And why is that? I think it's because we don't know what to do when we put down our phones. And our skills are decaying. So we have to relearn those skills. The second key reason this is happening, I believe, is that our attention has been fracked. And we're actually losing the ability to pay attention, not only to tasks, but to the people in front of us. The American psychologist Gloria Marx did a study and found that about 10 years ago, the average attention span we had for one thing, including a person before our brain gets like tugged away, was about 2.5 minutes. That doesn't sound great, but if you think about 2.5 minutes of uninterrupted time with another human, that's pretty good. Today, it's about 47 seconds. I mean, we can be in a meeting with somebody, responding to an email, having a notification on my phone for our work platform, uh, making sure our kids get their lunch at school, all at the same time. That's not normal for the human brain to process. And then finally, we've called these things soft for 50 years. Anytime the brain sees something as soft or simple, we devote less rigor to it. And Therefore, I mean, those skills have been underdeveloped and we haven't prioritized them with rigor. And now you're seeing it. You're seeing the fallout of that with people reporting lower quality interactions, 30% of people saying they feel invisible at work, 39% of people strongly, just 39% of people strongly agreeing that someone cares for them as a person at work, lowest it's ever been. Engagement is the lowest it's been in a decade, despite billions of dollars of investments on programs, perks, and initiatives. It all comes down to the interaction.
Mhm. Wow. I was thinking, Zach, in one of the foundational skills must be the first thing to do is try and help to get our attention back to be able to be in the present moment, right?
Absolutely. I mean, rebuilding that skill to pay attention, I would say is like the almost the skill that would open up the solution to everything else we're facing, right? For the next generation leaders, reclaiming our ability to pay attention and deeply understand the person across from us is going to be the quintessential skill. I mean, you're already seeing it actually in the age of AI, right? AI is accelerating this need because AI can do our tasks, it can't take moral responsibility for them.
Hmm.
AI can't be accountable to a human.
Hmm.
AI can't pay attention to you.
Hmm.
AI cannot care for you. And we're already seeing this as more people use AI, they see the limits of AI and what they feel around AI. And so they're actually yearning more for a caring, trusting human relationship more than ever. Like, who is out there that's going to take moral responsibility for me?
Hmm.
And I think that's why the World Economic Forum found that, in 2030, the most in-demand skills for the future of work, number 10 now is technological literacy. Number one, two, three, four, five are things like active listening,
Hmm.
curiosity, empathy, right? These human skills that we have to return to.
Gosh, yeah, because it's I know it was called the soft stuff for a very long time, but it's not soft. It's I often say it's the hardest stuff. And as you're saying, it's becoming harder because we're actually losing the skill of doing this.
Yeah, and we're losing the skill, and our environment is making it harder for us to do it. Like for remote work, many people for the last 5 years have worked in a hybrid model. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. We just got to recognize it makes it easier to not see people.
Hmm.
Like right now, as we're recording, I have a person in this icon walking out of a red door. I can click leave, right? So if you were
Had
frustrated,
enough. Yeah.
if you had it, no, but if you were frustrated in this call, say our time was up at the top of the hour, I click leave, but what happens is you disappear instantly. I don't have to think about you until the next time we interact. That's not really normal for the human interaction, the human connection, because in no other place in our lives as human beings have we had someone just disappear.
Yes. Yes.
And so it requires us to. So what's been missing is that if you're frustrated in a call, for example, and I see you and I click leave, it's incumbent upon us as humans to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I noticed you're frustrated. Is that right?"
Hmm.
But that closure, that feedback loop that helps us see that we were seen and that we actually are a real person. I mean, someone once told me in an interview, to be seen is to be real, like to be remembered, to have our details acknowledged.
Hmm.
That loop is missing in a lot of our communications.
Absolutely. And a lot of the conversations, Zach, I was in a board meeting yesterday and in person, and the meeting does finish, but the conversations that happen in leaving the boardroom, in maybe going to the bathroom together after the board meeting, and then walking to the car park are some of the most significant moments where you connect and feel like you matter and that you're making a contribution to those meetings.
Yeah, because what you don't see is if we were in a meeting and we left and I went like this, I put my head down and I went, oh, that's a signal, right? So if you don't notice that and say, hey, is something going on? Like what's going on? Then the inner voice, my inner lived experience, our inner voice, sociologists call, remain unheard.
Mhm.
That's why we can be listened to in a meeting, but feel unheard. And I think a lot of people are feeling that inner experience of work and the inner experience of life is not heard, which is an elementary form of mattering.
Mhm. So, where do we start? You've given us a few clues already. I'd love to go over that list of even character strengths I heard you talking about curiosity, having empathy. What other character strengths do we see in people that are able to help people matter or feel mattered?
Oh, that's a great question, and I think that the strengths are important, but the skills are more important, right? Strengths like Yeah, empathetic is important, but moving from empathy to compassion. Compassion is taking an action to alleviate a struggle. Empathy is coming to understand it. They're two different things. A lot of leaders get stuck in empathy spirals without taking action or thinking about what I like to call rational compassion, is thinking about what's the next best thing I could do to alleviate this struggle most readily right now. I would also say courageous.
Hmm.
It's actually quite countercultural to show people how they matter, especially in Western societies, because we take an individualistic perspective that someone should create their own sense of mattering, right? Our whole self-help industry has relied on the fact that people must help themselves. But ironically, if you look at the bestseller lists, all of those self-help bestsellers are teaching you how to cope with the trauma that was induced on you by someone else.
Yes.
We don't have many books to say how not to be a traumatizer, how to develop better relationships, but yet that's exactly what we need to do. So it takes courage to both be in the process of developing yourself and be out there putting yourself out there vulnerably to see and hear another person. So I think courage is really important. So empathy, compassion, courage are three of the major character strength that I see that are needed.
And maybe, like you said before, being real, being authentic in that conversation as well.
Yeah, being authentic, being known. I mean, to know, we have to be known.
Hmm. Hmm. Mm.
And again, oft we're taught not to do that, especially in the workplace. We're taught that we are mere means to someone else's end,
Mm-hmm.
versus we're the ends in ourselves. And that's the shift. But the good news about this is that you don't need your organization's permission for how you show up in your next interaction. One of the power sources that we can't give away is interactional power.
Hmm.
We may not have positional systemic power of what's going on around us from a macro political social perspective. We always have interactional power.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that we found that people who show people how they matter do is they're able to actually name these skills and practices and think about them as habits. And we've asked thousands of people, when you most feel that you matter, what is happening? And we found sort of this architecture of moments of mattering or interactions of mattering where people are really adept at the skills of noticing people, seeing and hearing them, affirming them, naming their unique gifts and how they make a unique difference, and then showing them how they're needed, showing people how them and their unique gifts and their unique presence and their unique inputs is necessary for something else.
Great. That's the part of the skill that you were talking about. Of course, the strengths are important, but the skill is the key. Zach, can you give us an example of what that would look like in delivering the skill of mattering?
Yeah. So again, there's three practices: noticing,
Mhm.
affirming, and needing. And underneath each of them, there are some sub skills. So we talked about attention already, relearning how to pay attention. One of the ways that looks in real life, in a real leadership scenario, is having some process to observe, note, actually write down and share back the details of people's lives and their work. There's simply too much going on to not have a tool to pay attention. One of my favorite stories in the book, and what I loved about doing this book, what I love about the research, is that all of the practices were things I saw real leaders doing. And I was like, teach me. I mean, I could connect it to the research, but I was like, teach me what you're doing. And I found all of these really innovative ideas. One of them stands out with me. There was this leader in a distribution center. All of the distribution center teams had very low engagement scores on their surveys, except for hers. And so I went to her team and I said, what's going on here? And they all said, it's our supervisor. She just gets us. We'd do anything for her. So I went to her and I said, what is going on here? And she pulls out this old notebook and she said, 3 years ago, I had this realization that I could not keep track of my people and the details of their work and of their lives. And so every Friday, I write down each of their names and I write down one thing I wanted to remember about them from that week. So if it was a conversation we had and I promised something, I would write it down. If they were struggling with a piece of equipment, I would write it down. If they were nervous about a meeting, I just made a little note. Or if they were going on vacation or their kid was starting a new sport, I'd write it down. And she said on Monday morning, first thing I do is get up, get into my office. I look at that list. I schedule a 3-minute interaction with each of them, a check in on my phone. And I just say, hey, I remember last week you were nervous about that meeting. How did it go? And she looked at me and she said, the number one lesson I've learned about leadership is that there's magic in being remembered.
Mhm.
What I love about it is that she didn't leave it up to chance. She had an actual tool. Like, right? I mean, I'm not asking people to keep a personal logbook on people's details, but you have to have some tool. Like on my one-on-ones, I started writing down, don't forget to ask about
Mm. Mhm.
dot dot dot, because it helps me think about, what did this person share with me the last time we talked that I can remember to show them that they're not just a event on my calendar. They're a person that I remember.
Fantastic. And I love that you said that her staff said she just gets us.
That was the vibe, right? They all said, she just gets us. She always has our back. She understands us.
Yeah. Because she understands who we are, what we stand for, what we care about. And I
Yeah.
love that she made it a practice and a habit. And it sounds like a non negotiable as something else that was in her diary as this must be done. And if this is done, we will perform well, even when time gets tough, because this stuff tends to fall out, I can imagine,
Yeah.
when work gets busy, people feel stressed. I spend a lot of time in the mental health and well-being space, and I know when people get stressed, all of the wonderful tools that help them to de-stress, they haven't got time for. Did you see the same pattern in the workplace that maybe when things were calm, people could prioritize this, but as soon as things got busy, it's like, oh, I haven't got time for that anymore.
Yeah, attention is our scarcest resource. So when a lot of stuff is happening to us, our attention goes to the what's in the house.
Mhm.
And we tend not to devote much attention to why we're doing it and who we're doing it with.
Mhm.
And we can get this split over time. The ironic thing about that is that the very energy we need to encounter and move through the things that are stressing us out reside in the people around us and the social support around us, as you know, right, from
Yes.
your work. And so we actually deplete the resource, the protective resource we all need
Mhm.
to move through.
Mhm.
And so, yes, it's easier to do all of this when everything's going well. But this is why I think it's really important to think about leadership, especially. And I mean, anybody who influences anybody, but leadership as an occupation. I think about pilots, for example, who are flying a plane. One of the things they have to do is they have these self checks they do. They do like a mental health self check. They do a emotional self check before every flight, right? They have a checklist, and then they go in and they have this checklist of things that even though they've flown 1,000 times, they have to check everything. And why is that? It's because the external environment is messy. There's things that are stressing us out. There's things that are coming at them. There's weather. There's delays. There's different types of passengers and routes and airports. And so what they know is that the environment is too volatile for them to rely on their intuition and how they feel. So they develop checklists. One of the things that we've seen organizations who create a sense of mattering and do this well is they have leadership checklists. Like,
Excellent.
this is how I'm going to show up in each interaction. And every day we just do a check with ourselves.
Mhm.
And it helps us, not to change ourselves, not to change what's stressing us out, but it helps us to remind us, oh, okay, there's a lot of things happening right now, but I am showing up for this person right now. My next great leadership act is my next interaction. And interestingly, when you build a culture of that, people start doing it for you, right? People start showing up that way for you. So I think we need to view leadership as an occupation
Yes.
that requires a set of skills and a set of readiness that we need to have every day and check in with ourselves and have that. One of the best ways to get out of what's called automaticity, where we just go through the motions,
Mhm.
succumb to the stress, is what's called articulated intention.
Mhm. Mhm.
Say something to yourself. Like, I will ask one curiosity based question in this conversation today. And oftentimes that brings your mind back to that moment.
Amazing, Zach. I love that, the checklist. And I know if people do go to your website, your Zach Mercurio website, they will find some resources there and free resources and even free checklists or audits or questionnaires that they can go through to actually see some of the skills or ways that they could bring mattering into their own days and maybe even create their own checklist.
Yeah, we also do a self-assessment that's there. You can get it. It's frequency of behavior. So it allows you to see like all of the skills under the noticing, affirming, and needing practices that help you to show people how they matter, and has you just think about the frequency at which you do them. And oftentimes that's what helps us to move from this is common sense. Like I doubt there's anybody listening right now that's like, yeah, I'd prefer not to show people how they matter. The problem is that common sense is usually not common practice, but elevating this from common sense to common practice is what is needed right now.
And have you seen people who may have not had this as a skill, but then have created it, were able to put prompts in their day? Or because we can get caught up in, we might start and remember this for a couple of days, then all of a sudden we go back into our default pattern. Have you seen some really great prompts or reminders that people have popped into their day to keep them on track, Zach?
Yeah, some people actually put like the noticed, affirmed, and needed framework just right on their
Yeah.
computer desk, right?
Yeah.
Other organizations have made it like a social rule that we make sure people feel noticed, affirmed, and needed in every interaction here. And they will actually put it in the chat before a virtual meeting, or they'll put a social checklist rule on their meeting room walls, just so we can all be reminded in our environment of it. One of the skills that also helps us be great noticers, for example, is asking better questions. So, like, ask a good question. I have one leader that has ask a good question on her computer, and one of the reasons why is that we tend to ask really bad questions. This is one of the easiest ways you can show someone how they matter is to ask a better question. Go beyond the greetings. How are you? How's it going? What's up? How's your day? And ask questions that people can actually answer. What is your attention today? What were you working on 5 minutes before we connected? What are some log jams you're facing in your projects? How can I help? Uh, Clear, open, exploratory questions can really go a long way. So even just putting that somewhere, like ask a good question, ask a curiosity-based question, can trigger your mind to think about it more intentionally. But like you have to do this authentically.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't want to take my
The
questions and
pressure.
all of a sudden be like, "Hello, what has your attention today?" Right? You have to like think to
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
what are some clearer questions you can ask that have an object, your attention and a time frame today? Are you asking open questions that don't require a yes or no response? Are you asking exploratory questions? One of the things that we find is we ask too many evaluative questions in work. What's the status on that? When's that project going to get done? My kid plays competitive soccer. If he comes home from practice and I ask him, "Did you hustle at practice?" Do you think he's going to be like, actually, no, Dad, I didn't, right? No, I mean, no, because that's an evaluative question.
Yeah.
Anytime someone asks us in a question in which they are in position to judge the quality of our response, they go on the defensive. So, like instead of, "Hey, did you hustle today?" "Hey, what's an effort you're proud of today?" Instead of, "Hey, are you going to get that project done by Friday?" "Anything I can help remove to get that project done by Friday?" You get the same data, but you give the power back to the person. So that's one of the easiest ways you can show someone how they matter, and prompts you can put, ask a good question.
Excellent. Some really good practical tips there, Zach. You did mention AI before, and I love what you talked about in terms of where you see what the limitations of AI are currently. And you never know, maybe they could change to be able to do that.
Yeah.
How can AI help us in this space? Can it help us to improve our skills?
Yeah, it can be used as an objective, like thought partner when you're facing something that's emotionally overwhelming. So if you're a leader or you're someone else and you are in sort of an empathy spiral, like, "Oh my gosh, this person just told me that three people in their immediate family are sick and they're caretakers, and that's just a lot for me to handle." I encourage people to, if to, to get out of that emotional spiral, put a prompt into a GPT and say, "These are the situations that I have an employee handling. What are some ways I can approach that compassionately?" To give you some ideas, not that you're going to print off your script and go in there, but to give you some ideas, because you get out of the empathy mode, and empathy actually results in a stress response. So when we experience empathy, we actually go into a fight or flight response. This is why we often, when something bad happens and we go into this empathetic mode and we stay there, we do things that actually don't make that much of a difference, like send a teddy bear or give money to a charity, just so we can get out of that spiral. But what ChatGPT can do, or any GPT, could just help you to think through some options that could best alleviate that person's struggle. It activates our rational brain and it balances those things out. So that's how I think we should use it as a thought partner with the goal of making people feel that they matter.
Very good. I like what you said there, Zach, around empathy. And I have heard that we get empathy fatigue, not compassion fatigue, where we hear a lot around society and in leadership that it's compassion fatigue. I've heard people say we actually have endless compassion. What we're fatiguing with is empathy.
Yeah, because when empathy again in a good way ignites a lot of those stress responses because it's getting your body ready to do something. But imagine, and you're an athlete, right?
I was.
Imagine you are an athlete, right? Imagine warming up, getting your body warmed up,
Yeah.
and then not doing
Not
anything.
being able to compete, not
It's
doing
sort
the
of
action.
right, not yeah, like going through your warm up routine and then not having any race to run, right? Your body gets all like jittery, and that's what happens with empathy.
Yes.
Is that we sort of ramp up, get ready, but then without the act of compassion, the rational act of compassion, what's the next act I can take that can most readily alleviate the struggle? Without that thinking, without those thought partners, without people talking about those things with us, we can get stuck in that exhaustion phase.
And it's very exhaustive. So, Zach, let's progress now from your second book, which you wished you'd written first. But anyway, we're going in that order today. So
Uh-huh.
we start to develop this skill of mattering and helping people to matter. Where does the invisible leader fit in now?
Yeah, so one of the key practices is to affirm people, which is to show people the difference that they make. And the invisible leader comes from Mary Parker Follett, 1928, management scholar. Back then, she said, leaders and followers are both following the invisible leader, the common purpose, that our sense of contribution, our usefulness actually pulls us forward. But again, to see that usefulness, to see that, we have to see how we're adding value. And one way that we can do that is to help show people the difference that they're making. Not just tell people thank you or good job, but show people really how what they're doing actually is serving a useful purpose. Um, One of the things I like saying is show them proof of purpose, right? Show people proof of purpose. What I mean by that is there was this park supervisor I was working with. He had really high morale on his team, really low turnover since he took over. He manages people in a national park that do all of the infrastructure maintenance, really tough job. But one of the things he did when I was observing him is he would go around the park and take photos of like bridges his team repaired and visitors walking over the bridge and photos of like a trail being used by a family. And he just sends an email every Friday that says, "Look what you did," in the subject line, and then he attaches the photos. And that's what I'm talking about. Giving people proof of impact, proof of purpose can really help people to build that sense that I'm adding value because that's what purpose really is. And then one of the things we talk about in The Invisible Leader is that people who develop a sense of purpose over time tend to have a so that mentality. So they can link whatever it is that they're doing with its inevitable impact. I'm doing this so that what? And that's that cyclical nature of how when we affirm somebody and show them the difference they make and show them proof of their purpose, they can start to develop that belief in that purpose and that bigger so that. And purpose itself is the part of mattering that's adding value. And you can see how you're adding value. And it's out ahead of us and it pulls us forward.
Oh, that's a beautiful, beautiful segue. I really love the invisible leader and it being, about purpose because in the work I've been in for a very long time, people get stuck on it. And Zach, I think I know that your work, or when you spoke at New Day and presented on purpose, it was probably the clearest information that I've ever seen around purpose. I know you studied it and you're an expert in purposeful leadership, but the frameworks that you gave us, the way that people can understand today what their purpose is, because a lot of people maybe think that they've got to wait for a crisis, or maybe have a story like mine, which is becoming a Paralympian and then understanding myself and going on to do these great things to help others through a story. But the information that you've been able to share with people, and the tools to help them realize their purpose today had such an impact on me that I've been able to pay forward to other people. So I wanted to thank you for that. Can you explain in your way the ways people who are listening today can think about their own purpose? And I know you've talked about maybe understanding what impact they're having can be helpful in that.
Yeah.
How can we go away and think about what is my purpose?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of purpose anxiety out there. When
Yeah,
somebody says, "What's your purpose?" It can
yeah.
get really anxiety provoking. Even for me, someone who studies it, right, and has a good sense that my purpose is to help people realize their significance, right? But I can always have that question, why am I here? What's going on? And I think the question has to be less about finding your purpose and more about seeing your purpose.
Mm,
Right. And so you already add value today. Purpose is where your unique strengths make a unique difference. Raise your hand if you have strengths. You do, if you're listening. Raise your hand if you interact with other people and add value today. You do. So you already have purpose.
mm,
It's really about seeing it. And that's why the difference between having purpose and being purposeful is so powerful. Because having purpose is knowing your contribution. Being purposeful is contribution centered thinking, being, and doing. And the degree to which we're purposeful and we start seeing our impact is the degree to which we start seeing what our purpose is. So, one of the things is I encourage you to start with developing a so that mindset. Think about what you're doing today and ask yourself, I'm doing this so that what? You'll start to see the impact that you make. We also find that there are three major components to purpose, right? Our strengths and what we love to do and what we're good at, our talents, what other people ask us to do, things that we're especially naturally talented at, and then how those things impact other people. One thing you could do this over the next 3 weeks. For the next week, write down what you were good at every day at the end of each day. The next week, write down what you loved to do at the end of each day. And then the next week, write down what bothered you about the world, what impact that you made, how did you leave people better? And then at the end of 3 weeks, summarize each of those things, and you will see your purpose. Because you'll see that there are themes of things you love, things that energize you, things that you're good at, things that other people ask you to do, and then that question of you'll start seeing of what bothers you, the impact that you make or you want to make, and it's an ongoing process. Purpose is crafted; it's not found. And then I'll steal this one from my friend Simon Sinek. And one of the easiest ways he says to find your purpose is to ask your friends why they're friends with you.
mm-hmm. Love that.
And they will tell you, and they'll usually tell you the impact that you have on them. And those are clues to your purpose.
That's great. And Zach, if I remember rightly, you also suggested that we all have a job description. And if you leave your workplace and someone else fills your job description, if you could go back and ask your colleagues, what do they miss about you that's not in that description? Am I right? Is that
Yes,
you've
yes.
had impact
Yep.
on me? I remember
Yeah.
your teachings. I love that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Aside from what I do and how I do it, what's missed when I'm not there?
Yeah.
What's the unique? Every human being, we all bring at least four unique gifts to the table. Those strengths, what we love to do and what we're good at, our perspective, how only we see the world, our purpose, the unique impact we make, which is what we're talking about, but then our wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
what's something only we can teach other people because only we have lived our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So, usually when you ask those questions, like, why are you friends with me? What do you miss when I'm gone? You
Mm-hmm.
start gathering that data, you start to see evidence of those four gifts.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also do it for yourself too. I mean, write down those four gifts and ask, like, what's something I can only teach? You have many things you can only teach because only you have lived your life. What are some ways only I see the world? What are some ways that I impact even the conversation in front of me? Like when someone leaves a conversation with me, what do they leave thinking, feeling, being able to do? Because it's me.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are things I love to do and what am I good at? And you'll very quickly see that you have gifts, you make an impact, and you have purpose now. But like you said earlier, what we think about
Mm-hmm.
is really what we talk about. What we talk about and think about is who we become. So we have to devote time to thinking about these things.
And when you're able to help people in I suppose, a more simpler way to understand purpose and reduce the anxiety around purpose, what impact from your research, what impact did you see that was happening for individuals and organizations, Zach?
Well, I mean, the data on that, we don't have much data on that, but the anecdotal I could tell you is people just relax.
Mm,
And they go, the day becomes an opportunity, not a burden.
mm,
Instead of going into a meeting being like, what can I get out of this meeting? Because purpose is inherently our contribution. What can I get out of this meeting? What can I get from this person? It's how can I make this moment better?
mm.
How can I use my strengths to make a difference in this interaction? It's when people wake up in the morning, instead of looking at their calendar saying, what do I have to do today? It's how is what I'm going to do today going to impact other people? And we hear from people that it really reframes their day because they realize that, you may not be able to accomplish everything on your to-do list today, but every day you have the ability to contribute to another person. And and there is research that when people have more of those contribution-centered goals than they do what's called resume goals or achievement-based goals, which a lot of us have, that we actually feel less anxious, we
Mm.
build better relationships, and we experience greater well-being over time because of the stability that purpose provides.
Yeah. And I was also thinking, Zach, one of the things that you do hear people say, if you are, struggling and having a difficult day, if you can go out and help someone else, can actually give you a boost to your well-being. And that's obviously being purposeful by you using
Yeah.
to contribute to somebody else.
And that's counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Because usually, if you are feeling like you don't matter or feeling tired, our natural instinct is to survive. So we turn inward.
And isolate.
Um, yeah, and because our whole like cardiovascular system increases, our bodies start going into survival mode. But interestingly enough, because we're built to be interdependent, because we were actually built to rely on others in difficult times. When we don't do that, we almost like short circuit. But if you just go out to the grocery store, and research shows that if you call a clerk by their name and ask how they're doing and have a conversation about their life and offer gratitude for them to being there, you start coming back to equilibrium of what it means to be an interdependent human. And you start realizing you feel a little bit better. And that's because your body wants to reward you for doing what you were designed to do, which is to be with others and not struggle alone.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes back to, again, asking good questions too, Zach. I think one of the takeaways from today is being able to ask good questions of others and of yourself. Who can I help today? What
Oh, yeah.
have. I remember you also mentioning, again, another thing that's stood out for me when I first heard you speak was asking good questions of your children, because if we don't structure our questions well, they'll answer in a certain way that is yes or no, or maybe just a little mumble or grumble. Can you give us some examples of the questions that you ask your family? You've got young children, and you're a purposeful leadership expert, but it also starts in the conversations that you have with your loved ones.
Yeah, and I don't always do it well, but I try to do it. I mean, I think one of the questions that we've been asking really since our kids were in daycare are who did you help today and who helped you today? There's a couple reasons why that question is important. The questions we ask direct people's attention. So instead of directing attention to what did you do or what didn't you do today, you're directing your attention to who did you help and who helped you today. And by doing that, you're actually giving them the evidence that they are helpful and that they do matter and that they are worthy now, regardless of what age they are. So those two questions have been powerful. The other one is I've really been focused on asking more exploratory questions than evaluative questions. So, we limit screen time in the house, but tablet time is a thing. You get 20 minutes a day, right? And so what happens is that my 10-year-old, as I was researching this book, I remember every time I would tell him to turn off his tablet, I'd say, "Hey, can you turn off your tablet?" He would grumble and be like, "Wow, whatever." Right? And he would always try to negotiate and get angry. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm asking for compliance. Like I'm asking for compliance, not really commitment on his part. And so what I started doing is there was one time I was in the kitchen, he was on the couch, he had his tablet open. And instead, I had just read this article. And so instead, I went up to him and I said, "Hey, what are you watching?" And he started talking, and I said, "Oh, what do you like about that show?" Started telling me about the characters. Oh, like, what do you like about the characters? Just this explosion of information, right? He shut the tablet off, and we were talking. And I think that that's so often, we often try to evaluate or control our children instead of try to explore and understand them.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, he has a teenage daughter, and he was really struggling to connect with her. And he realized he was asking a lot of evaluative questions, a lot of like, so who are your friends? I mean, how much time are you spending on social media? Like all those questions that we wouldn't answer ourselves. But so he heard about a question from one of his therapists actually, who recommended asking, "Hey, what is it like to be a teenager right now?" And he asked that question, and he said that their relationship just blossomed from that.
Oh, great story, Zach. I know I'm always conscious. I also read it from a parenting expert when I have three sons, and when I go into my middle son's room, there's always mess. And I can go in there and say hello, and then usually leave with saying, "Can you pick that up?" or "Can you tidy that?" Or and I remember reading this part in a book that said, "Make sure you go into your children's room to connect and nothing else."
Yeah,
Find out
right.
what they're watching, and like what you were saying, ask all those questions, and then and leave, and don't add on, and can you pick that towel up at the end, because it really just, I suppose, makes everything that you've done to build that connection, you've just wiped it out with that final, and clean your room up.
Isn't that, I mean, this is like full circle though to leadership.
Yeah.
We do that as leaders all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, hey, how's it going? Oh, by the way, what's the status on that project?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's why when someone here sees your name on the phone, they're like, "Oh, I don't know." Or is mom gonna come in here and she's coming in my room? Oh, what's gonna happen? We get into like protective mode, and which is a lot of the reasons why people feel unseen.
Mm. So it's kind of like separating, making sure you have the time for connection only, and
Absolutely.
the buts or the ands or the task lists on
Yeah.
that conversation, leave in the workplace, and then have, conversation B, which is maybe about
Yeah.
what needs to be done.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that example, by the way,
Yeah.
the where you read that. That's great.
Well, Zach, I can't let you go. You did drop Simon Sinek's name in there, and I saw you doing some amazing work with him online, and people can be a part of that as well. Can you just, before we let you go, just talk to us about your connection with Simon and the work that you're doing together?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Simon and I connected with is we're both trying to reteach human skills. Simon's doing a lot of work right now on the skills to be a friend,
Mm.
right? These basic skills that we've forgotten and we haven't used as much in the last 25 years, especially. And so there's a great course we did together called How to Be a Leader People Actually Trust and maybe even love on his website. But it's a video course with him. It was really great. We talk about these essential human skills because at the core, mattering helps build trustworthy relationships, whether it's with your kids or with the people you serve. So that's on his optimism library, and that's been great. But I think it's more important is that there's a big need to relearn these human skills.
I love calling it being human.
Yeah,
It's like
right.
there needs to be a subject from reception all the way
Right.
12 and beyond, called being human, because
Yes,
we're
yes.
out of being human. And I feel
Yeah.
that from today's conversation. Zach, your final tip, and you could repeat something that you've already said. What do you really want to leave our New Day listeners with today?
Well, just ask everybody in your life that's close to you, wherever, work, family, this question. When you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing? And write those things down and do more of those things. And you'll be surprised at what you find.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Zach, you're about to go into Thanksgiving, which is a really exciting time for you, and we're really grateful to squeeze in some time with you before you go on Thanksgiving. That's a really wonderful time to be able to ask those questions yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And, this idea of gratitude, we often think about what we're grateful for, but thinking about who we're grateful for and then telling them is important. Closing that gap. If I asked everybody to think about someone you're grateful for, and then if I asked you to tell me the last time you told them, there's usually a gap. So this is really all about turning those good intentions we have into good actions.
Wonderful. Well, Zach, thank you so much for spending some time
Thank you.
with us today. Once again, it's been an absolute pleasure. I always learn a ton from you. If people want to know more, you've got a fabulous website, which we've got in the show notes, a couple of great books to read, and lots of resources online. Thank you so much again, Zach. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. Thanks, Katrina.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the New Day podcast. For more inspiration and tools to lead for the greater good, visit newday.world. Keep leading with purpose, and we'll see you next time.